Welcome to the A Minute to Midnight show, folks. This is Tony coming to you from New Zealand, and I have on the show a pretty regular guest, Mike from the Onpoint Preparedness channel. It's really good to be talking to you, Mike, in January, fairly early in the new year, and I think it's going to be a pretty massive year, this one.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Happy 2020.
And same to you. It's going to be interesting to see how happy it is.
That's true.
There's certainly a lot of things.
We can be hopeful.
Yeah, we can, and we're going to be happy no matter what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. Joy.
We got a lot to talk about, though, and it's only been like the first week.
Oh, I know. Exactly. There are certainly no shortage of things we can talk about. I suppose the probably obvious place to start would be this Iran situation. What are your thoughts on what's going on?
Well, to be honest, so I haven't done research into the conspiratorial nature behind it, right? So I've only seen headlines, so I can't really speak to this. Maybe you have a better understanding.
I haven't really been looking at the conspiratorial aspect of it too much either, to be honest.
Yeah, there's and actually it sort of has some credence to it. Again, just based on the very light information that I have. But there's some sources, and this is pretty fresh news. I mean, it's only been released within the last 24 hours or so, that the Iraqi prime minister said that he was meeting with how do you say his name, Soleimani?
Yeah.
He was meeting with Soleimani in terms of trying to strike a peace deal. So trying to tap down on a lot of the tensions and a lot of the just general animosity in the region. And so if that's true, again, that this isn't just some small websites that are reporting on this. It's actually, some larger, more mainstream sources. I mean, if that's true, that even makes this more big of a deal, that there was a prearranged peace deal meeting with Soleimani and the Iraqis, and they just took him out, and the storyline that the United States gave that he was conspiring to do another attack was false. So that's one thing. And then also there's a potential other aspect of this where the United States and Israel were in some type of talks to say, take him out, so Israel was involved in this as well. But again, it's fresh off the press. I haven't really researched into it, but I'm sure your audience can go start Googling and find these articles for themselves and discern according to their own judgment.
Well, it's interesting for a start. Today I've seen recently, or Matt sent me through an article just before I came on here from Fox News, which I just read very briefly, quickly. Iran's fired more than a dozen ballistic missiles into Iraq, targeting US military and coalition forces on Wednesday, Pentagon officials said. So it looks like that there is some retaliation happening now. And no doubt there'll be some more, and we'll have to wait and see in what form it takes. And now, as far as Israel goes and the supposed involvement, I mean, there are always people that are going to blame Israel for everything. Let's face it. There are some people, I know people that follow A Minute to Midnight, that Israel's to blame for everything. I mean, if their cat gets run over, it was Israel's fault. So, but Benjamin Netanyahu actually has come out and distanced Israel from the US airstrike and telling his ministers that they should stay out of it, apparently. Netanyahu told his security cabinet that Israel should stay out of any fallout sparked by the killing of Iranian commander Soleimani. The Israel Prime Minister told top ministers on Monday that since the general's assassination was carried out solely by the US, there is no reason to get involved. Iran has promised a crushing revenge following the strike, which killed Soleimani and other top Revolutionary Guards commanders last week, expected to ramp up on Tuesday when the 3-day period of mourning ends. But we've already heard Iranian minister, like a guy, I think his name's Mohsen or something, Rezai, I don't know if that's how you exactly pronounce it, who's a former Guard commander, and he has threatened to reduce Israeli cities Tel Aviv and Haifa to dust as part of the retaliation. So, we shall see Israel obviously is being threatened. Iran always does. I mean, there's like people chanting. You see it. There's I reckon possibly 1 million people in Tehran at the funeral thing. Whatever they call it, and calling for death to America and death to Israel. A lot of them.
Yeah. And I understand Soleimani's just a very popular figure, not only in Iran, but in the region. So you can see this being cross borders, right? That there's even people outside of Iran that are now thinking about unification. Even there was some talk about how this is going to change the Iraqi disposition towards the United States as well.
Well, it already is, I think. Yeah.
Here's actually the article. This is off of CNN. It's edition.cnn.com. So I guess it's a little bit more low key than the main one. It says Iraqi Prime Minister was scheduled to meet Soleimani the morning he was killed. Iraqi Prime Minister Adil Abdul Mahdi said at the parliamentary session on Sunday that he was scheduled to meet with Soleimani on the morning the top general was killed. Mahdi said that Soleimani was supposed to carry a message from Iran in response to the Saudi message that we brought to Iran in order to reach important agreements and situations regarding Iraq and the region. So there was some type of message that the Saudis had to Iran in order to reach stabilization in the region. I don't know if the Saudis specifically invited Soleimani to Iraq in order to talk about peace or negotiations or whatever. But it looks like Soleimani was coerced out and then they basically assassinated him. So there's probably a lot behind the scenes, but really it doesn't matter, right? I mean, they already pulled the trigger. They're going to retaliate. Yeah. As I think you mentioned, right, they raised that red martyrdom flag, which has only been raised in like major times of conflict or war. So now it's just the media, especially the mainstream media in the States, they're just loving this because now they're talking about, it's like 9/11 all over again. Is it going to be a biological, chemical attack, biological attack, cyber attack? And, they're getting their ratings. And so I don't know. There's certainly going to be a response, but I don't know if this is it, right? I don't know if this is what starts to make the dominoes tumble, because we've had so many situations over the past couple of years where we all thought it was it, where we've had Korea, North Korea lobbing missiles literally over the nation of Japan. And I mean, that's pretty serious. The the supposed, I'll say, chemical warfare from Assad and the Syrian civil war, Ukraine. I mean, you name it. There's been some pretty heightened events here. This is by no means less than those, but it's just like year after year. They're sort of on par with one another, or we just keep steamrolling ahead. I just wonder how long we've got.
Well, it is really hard to know. We don't know, actually. And in terms of the Iranians that are, death to Israel and all what will raise Haifa and Tel Aviv to the ground and all that. I mean, I think that's a lot of it's bluster, really, because who in their right mind, well, some of the Iranians are not in their right mind because they're looking for the Mahdi, and the Third World War is kind of how they think they'll get him in there. But for the most part, if they launch attacks, massive attacks, nuclear attacks and so on, it would just be an all-out mess. Israel's got a lot of firepower to hit back. So, they'd have to be, pretty brave or very crazy or a combination thereof to do something like that. So I don't know. Yeah, we do get a lot of this kind of Chicken Little skies falling down kind of stuff. This is it. Right. But possibly another serious thing to consider is Hezbollah, because they have, Hezbollah is far more powerful, I think, than ISIS or anybody like that, really. Mm-hmm. They are very, very strong, and I think a lot of people believe, have sleeper cells within America. So the potential for them to actually launch attacks within the United States is probably, most Americans would just think, that'll never happen. Life carries on as normal. It's fine when it's over the other side of the world and we can pull the trigger and launch things. But if it hits home on US soil, it might be a different story. So that who knows if that's going to happen or whether this just dies down with a whole lot of bluster and threats and some small reprisals, or whether it escalates. Because the other thing is, Iran's been doing a lot of exercises with Russia and China in recent times too. So it's like the potential for people think Iran's a tin pot enemy. A lot of I've seen people saying that Iran has this many aircraft and aircraft carriers, and the US has so many more, but they forget that Russia and China, and so on, and other countries, Lebanon and even Turkey, that could side with them. So it's a tricky thing, boy. It's let's just hope and pray that it doesn't escalate into anything too much. But it is interesting that John Bolton had said would see you in Tehran in 2019, which they didn't get, but we're early in 2020. And obviously John Bolton's not part of Trump's admin now, but he was when he made that statement.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, and one of the things that people saw Putin doing, because the writing has been on the wall for quite a while, and the prospects for global war have always been there. I think for years now, even probably before I got saved, it was around 2015, Vladimir Putin has always been fairly frank in his messages to the media. He just sort of talks about the U.S. and sort of what the games that Russia's playing with them and that they're playing with them. He's quite frank that, we're trying to avoid war, but, people are putting their chess pieces in place and they're moving them around, and that's really what they're doing. I think there's generally an apprehension to get into war, but they all sort of acknowledge that that's where we're going. And so now it's just, let's get our players all of our ducks in a row.
Yeah.
Let's get everything as positioned as we possibly can, and then something will happen. Because, a lot of these countries have shown amazing restraint, especially, with Syria, right? I mean, I forget all the escalations, but remember when we were putting Patriot missile batteries in all around Poland. We were basically surrounding Russia with Patriot missile batteries. And they're saying, like, you were surrounding our entire country as a quote unquote defensive measure, but really you're okay. Putin's like, come on now, really? like this is seen as a threat to us. And so, it's a matter of time. We all know that this type of thing is coming. And so it's just get prepared spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally, psychologically, just get overall prepared.
And I think we'll get into a bit more of that shortly, that being prepared thing. But I'm just wondering, have you actually seen, I don't know if you have, that article, ChristianEvidence.net, the destruction of Iran, Jeremiah 49?
No, I have not.
Very, very interesting article, actually, that's been sent to me. Well, Chris, Minute to Midnight's Chris, phoned me yesterday and he mentioned it, and I thought, I'll have a look. And then Joni Stahl sent it to me, and then Fred, the ET Prepper, sent it this today as well, and I've read it. It's an extremely interesting article. I will not obviously read the whole article because it's long, but I do suggest people go find it. It's called The Destruction of Iran, Jeremiah 49, and it's at ChristianEvidence.net. It starts off like this. There is another prophecy concerning Iran that possibly precedes the Gog and Magog scenario outlined by Ezekiel. In Jeremiah 49, 34-39, we are told that Elam will come under the judgment of God for conspiring to launch an attack against Israel in the latter days. Modern-day Iran is comprised of ancient Elam, about 1/10, and Persia. This prophecy concerning Iran has not yet been fulfilled, but seems to align with Iran's current nuclear aspirations. And he says, let's see the prophecy. So the first verse, 49:35, says, Behold, I will break the bow of Elam, the chief of their might. Jeremiah predicts that Iran will be struck at the foremost place of its strength. Today, this could infer an attack upon Iran's growing nuclear program. One of Iran's most strategic and vulnerable nuclear targets is Bushehr, however you pronounce it. I'm not very good with some of these foreign words. Anyway, the nuclear reactor located in the heart of ancient Iran. And Jeremiah also predicts that Iran will suffer the fate of a broken bow. When your bow is broken, you cannot load the arrows from out of your quiver, or in a modern sense, the missiles out of your silo. This might imply that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps will be unable to launch scores of its missiles or arrows in modern warfare at its enemy. And then 36, I'll make this the last bit because there's so much more, but it says in verse 36, and upon Elam I will bring the four winds from the four quarters of heaven and will scatter them toward all those winds, and there shall be no nation whither the outcasts of Elam shall not come. So if that were to be a literal, as this article sort of says or infers, if they were to attack Iran's nuclear facilities there in the mountains, then the fallout from it and the radiation could send everyone scattering and make that part of Iran totally uninhabitable. And so therefore the people would scatter to all places. And that would be that part of Iran destroyed. But it's not the whole of Iran, it's just that particular section of it. So I don't know. Anyway, it's just very interesting that this is a prophecy that has not yet been fulfilled, that Jeremiah 49 prophecy. So could it be that we're coming towards seeing it? Who knows? But it's very interesting. Worth a read.
Yeah. Oh, or regardless, I mean, this is prophetic just with the events of 2020 and just to see how close we are, right? That this region is going to suffer war. And, we all believe that we're the terminal generation. This is the end time. It's going to be bad. And as you mentioned, there is a high prospect for nuclear war. In fact, I don't know if you remember this, but there's some evidence that nukes were already deployed in and around Ukraine. Not the big types of nukes, talking about Hiroshima or anything like that, but these are called mini nukes.
Yeah.
They're still pretty big, but I don't know if you remember seeing some of the footage around Ukraine where there was actually like a neutron cloud after some of these bombs that were dropped. It's, if people look that up, I think it's a neutron cloud or something of that sort. But basically, the bomb goes off, and you see these bright, not necessarily like a firework, but bright sparkles of light in this cloud. It's like a flash of flashes, and so. Yeah, the prospects of nuclear war is just sort of crazy. I've always wondered, that the Lord said, he'll never destroy the world again by water, but the second time will be by fire. And you wonder if it's by means of nuclear warfare or not.
Yeah, I somehow don't think. Well, I don't think we'll end up with a full-blown exchange because there's so much weapons that everyone could destroy everyone else. Basically, I don't know that it'll ever get that bad, but who knows? I mean, there's too many other things that would need to happen, which to me seem like a lot of other things that are not related to that. So, but I'm not categorically saying that, but somehow. I don't know. But anyway, the other side of this thing is it's so hard to know what to believe in terms of news and everything is propaganda. Obviously, the Americans have their propaganda. You have the Iranians have theirs and you have Israel with theirs. And I don't think any side in this is faultless. People side with one thing or the other. I think the regime there is insane, basically. They're not rational, and they do want to bring in the Mahdi. And I remember when Ahmadinejad was the leader there, how often he talked about that sort of thing. So, yeah, I don't think they're to be trusted, but Are is the propaganda that comes out of the US and out of Israel to be really relied on either? It's just very hard to get to the facts of what's really going on a lot of the time.
Main message is that this is like the birth pangs, right? It's a warning sign. It's a harbinger. A lot of Christians in the social media feeds have been saying, get ready, get ready. And that's why I think you watched the video, right? Everyone's saying get ready, but no one's really talking about how to get ready. And so I think some people perceive it as, some people are getting prepared physically. There's a lot of people that are just being more keen on watching the news in terms of getting ready. I got to study up on prophecy, and I got to figure out all these world events. But time and time again, as you look through sort of the judgments declared against Israel all throughout the Old Testament, and you read about the coming of Christ again, it's all about getting your hearts ready and getting prepared for the second coming of Christ, so that you are basically you're in Christ, that you're abiding and fellowshipping in Him. And so don't want to also lose sight of the fact that people need to search their hearts. Repent. That's good. I mean, we have seen a lot of calls to repentance, so I don't want to discount that as well. But that's the key thing: is rent your hearts. Come back to Christ, repent, and that's truly the getting ready. So make sure you're doing that for yourself, and you're discipling others, and have that at the core of your life over these. Well, for however long we're here for.
Yes, for sure. And none of us do know what's going to play out. It's sort of on the same track, but off track a little bit too, away from the Iran thing. But it was really interesting. They had today, or earlier, they had a 6.5 or 6.6 earthquake in Puerto Rico. And Jose Polanco, who... Well, he was the uncle in probably the most popular video A Minute to Midnight's ever put out, which was the 16-year-old boy's vision of the Great Tribulation. Jose was the uncle in that. Well, he posted a little short video that he's made today on... He's there on the island, and I'll read what he said, just a little thing he said. This is Midnite, Puerto Rico today, 50 miles away from the centre of the earthquake. People swarming the gas stations as 100% of the island power grid is down. And that was recorded on the 1st of the 7th, 2020, just before noon. We're still here, and so far we're safe. Keep us in your prayers, he said. So when he posted that video showing the massive lines of cars waiting to get gas, and it's not the whole of the island, but it was pretty much, I think, 97% perhaps of it, no power. And as I watched this, it really hit home to me how important it is that we try to be as prepared as we reasonably can ahead of time for such things, because it's too late to prepare with gas and food and water after a disaster, whether it's a natural disaster or a man-made disaster or a war or an EMP attack. The power grid being down is a major thing if it goes down for any length of time. And looking at those cars, it was like, wow, this could be any number of scenarios that could happen in any number of places. And obviously, those people didn't have gas in their cars much, or they wouldn't be waiting. And I don't know how long the power's out for or whatever, but to me, it was just a real wake-up call to say, hey, folks, we just need to be prepared, because whatever the situation is, or if it's a natural disaster, an earthquake like that one, or a tsunami, or worst case, an EMP disaster, an EMP attack or something, then what if you've done no preparation? And I know people, God will look after me and all that, but sometimes I think God looks after people by telling them to prepare. And what are your thoughts?
Well, I'll have to remember a funny story after I get through some other things about EMPs, because I was preparing for that for a little bit. But so I remember a similar situation to that video that you shared, and that was actually in 2001 after the 9/11 terrorist attacks. I don't know how widespread this was across the United States, but there was some rumor that the media picked up on, saying that, well, because of the Middle East origin of these terrorists, that's going to dramatically increase the price of gas, like apocalyptic gas prices. So people, out of fear, again, the gas prices rose like 30 cents or something. Something ridiculous. But, they're giving this apocalyptic message. And so my mom was like, "Oh, Mike, you better go take the cars and go get gas." Well, me and, the entire town went to go get gas, and it was like hour wait lines for gas. People were freaking out. And so when I was watching that video, that really reminded me of that event that happened in my life many moons ago. But the one thing I wanted to talk about with regards to preparedness, and I've been thinking about this quite a while, there's a lot of people, as you've mentioned, that believe or have faith that God is going to get them through and that they don't need to prepare. And I think in some cases that is a true faith. I think that there are some people who have true communion with the Lord that have a faith to say, "Don't prepare, I'm going to take care of you." I think there's other people that don't prepare, and they don't do it because they just don't want to, right? There's like a type of apathy that has set in. But then there's another group of people like you and me who our faith is that we should prepare. It's a prudent thing to do. It's a good insurance policy, and we see the signs of the times and we're getting ready. It's basic wisdom. And so we are preparing out of faith. However, I do believe that there are those who are preparing, and it's not necessarily out of faith. It's completely out of fear. Like they are in bondage to fear, and like everything is prepping, and I've got to do this and that. Like they are seriously going into bondage. And so, the fear in prepping, I think, is a bad thing, as well as the apathy in not prepping is a bad thing. But I do see maybe a good faith for not prepping and a good faith in prepping. And let me explain. It might be that a person's faith says, "Don't prepare, I'm going to take care of you." And perhaps God leads that person who wasn't preparing to the person who was preparing. And faith is complete. And so the faith of the person who was preparing is met with the person who was saying God will sustain you, and they're brought together. Possibly. I don't know. Just there's a verse in the Bible which says, as the wind goes, you do not know which way the wind blows, so it is with the Spirit of God. Perhaps there are some people where their true faith is saying, I'm going to take care of you. So if that's what you want to do, fine, right? I mean, everyone has their own free will. They can do as they wish. I guess the worry is, and again, I'm always thinking both sides of the coin here. If you don't prepare, if you say, I have a faith that says don't prepare, if you get stuck starving to death and you can't prepare, you can't provide for your family, and you're watching your children and your wife, or vice versa, your husband suffer, well, that's going to be a test of that faith. So just keep that in mind. If you are preparing, you have a faith to say that I see the signs of the times, I'm going to prepare, and you put all your stuff in your house and it goes up in flames, your faith is going to be tested. Are you going to have the faith to still trust in God even though everything that you've acquired went up in flames? Or are you going to challenge God as to why have you taken this from me? I mean, either or. There's a lot of different scenarios in which a person's faith is dictating them to do a certain thing, as well as that same faith being tested. So I just say, outside of faith, I think it's just a smart thing to do. Yeah. I mean, even having a little bit, not even talking about end time stuff, just, especially as a head of a household, a father, a husband, you want to take care of your family. I think you should be doing this. I personally think it's unwise to. But in terms of prepping for the end times, a lot of people who don't prepare and they say I have a faith that says I should rely on God, they'll say, well, your prepping isn't going to do anything. Have you even thought about Jacob's trouble and exactly what that means? All the little earthly possessions that you're, acquiring mean nothing. It's like, okay, well, if that's your faith, feel free. And maybe that is a true faith. Maybe God does provide for you in some way by using the faith of another who had prepared. But just acknowledge that same faith might be tested and you might be left with nothing, and you're still going to have to trust in God.
I totally agree. And I was just thinking, I also got an email. Well, it was actually Hudson, my friend Hudson, replying, I think, to Matt's email about the situation with Iran firing missiles into Iraq. And Hudson replied with, have you seen the price of silver and gold has gone up a lot today? And because he watches it like I do. And to me, that also reiterates, I know there are so many people that say, oh, your silver and gold will be worthless and thrown into the streets and all that kind of thing. And I've actually written an article on why I believe that's probably one of the most misrepresented verses in all of Scripture. And I won't go into the details as to why, but there is an article on the Midnite website explaining why that is. But so I look at it and think, well, this is just exactly why I think people do get silver and gold, because you get something like happens with this Iran situation and bam, everyone goes to that safety of that. Mm-hmm. And when we get some really serious stuff going down, that's what's going to happen. And, fiat currencies start collapsing or losing great value and things. That'll be the safe haven as it always has been for 6,000 years, basically. And so when I first, with Chris, we started A Minute to Midnight, it really started off the back of God saying to us that, this is the beginning of the end times, really starting to get sort of serious. And it was to tell people to prepare. And one of the main things that we really felt was to tell people that precious metals is something, if you can do it, to hold some. And that's sort of where A Minute to Midnight started from, in a way, and I haven't changed from that viewpoint. Not that some people can't, and that's fine as you go with the whole prepping thing, as you mentioned. Some people just can't. But for those that can, I do think it's a wise thing to do, to have some and not to put all your eggs into the US dollar basket. And certainly not in the stock market as your safe haven.
And I'll tell you another challenge of your faith for anyone who is preparing, right? So one of them is, what if it's all taken away from you?
Yeah, what you can do, yeah.
The other one is, you're preparing, you have a limited budget, you have a limited amount of storage space, right? People aren't saving up 7 years worth of food for an entire family, right? It's some people a month, maybe a quarter, some people a year for their family. If people who are needy come to you, what are you going to do? That's going to be a test of your faith. Yeah. That is absolutely going to be a test of your faith. And, there's scripture to say, if someone has come to you and you say, oh, bless you, go on your way. Oh, now you're really going to have to start thinking, because you've got a limited, right? It's limited. You're limited on funds. You're limited on storage space. You also don't want to go crazy. A lot of people are, this is a moderate amount of preparation.
Yeah.
And then let's just say you do get into this end time scenario, and people come to you asking for food. That's going to be a test of your faith. So think about those things. Also, I was sort of giggling when you were talking about. There was something that you mentioned about prepping, and you mentioned EMPs. I had a little giggle to myself, because I think preparing is necessary. I think it's smart. I think it's prudent. I think it's an insurance policy. But I also want to be careful that people don't fall into bondage into it, because I would say that before I was saved, I really was falling into a type of bondage with preparedness. It just pretty much consumed. I mean, I liked it. It was fun for me. It was Onpoint Preparedness. That was the whole purpose of my channel. So it was sort of like a more than a hobby for me. But there is so much, and that's why a lot of people maybe get a little bit apathetic and they don't prepare, is they don't know where to start.
Yeah,
it's like there's too much to do. It's not going to happen. I'm not going to do it. And so there's things you need to know about. Just general survival skills. If you want to know how to use a firearm, if you're into that, how do you use that? How do you get trained? How do I get trained on medical procedures? All this stuff. And so it can really consume you and put you into bondage. And one of the things that happened to me, you'll like this story. I think it's pretty funny. So I was preparing for EMP, and you need a Faraday cage if you're going to prepare for EMP.
Yeah.
So I got a galvanized trash can, and I got aluminum HVAC tape and taped up every single seam, like triple tape. And I put all my really sensitive gear in there, like all my sensitive electronics, which includes a lot of the stuff that I use, like flashlights or something. So I put the lid on that thing, and you tape it down with aluminum HVAC tape. I don't know if you've ever used that stuff. It's just super sticky. I had to cut that dang thing open so many times to get my flashlights out. I said, heck with it. I was like, if there's an EMP, just, you know what? Okay. And like the amount of tape I used on that thing is just ridiculous. So that was bondage. I'll tell you what, that was bondage. And I was like, I'm not taping this stuff back in there. Lord help me. So yeah, there's a balance.
Totally agree. I mean, I believe in prepping, and yeah, I'm certainly not a major prepper. If you know, I do what I can. I have limited budget, pretty much anyway, and I've been doing it for quite a while now, a few years, a bit here and a bit there, and to me it's important, but I'm not one of those, try and do everything. I know people that are far more prepared than I am, and that know all the ins and outs and the tricks. I'm certainly not at that level by a long shot. But I do believe, and I've got nothing against those people, because those are the type of people that we're actually that we can learn a lot from, and that are going to be probably the most helpful when things really get to it. Yeah. That have all these type of skills, and I'm certainly not at that level, but I do like to encourage people to prepare without you don't do it from a place of fear. That's
right.
That's not. Well, that's counterproductive. It doesn't serve any good purpose, living in a fear of it. It's kind of like you just do a little bit here and a little bit there, and gradually your preparations come together and you learn some skills. What if, that we need this skill and that skill, and it is kind of fun. Well, it wouldn't be fun if you're in total bondage to it or a fanatic, right? Because I'm certainly not, But
that's where you prep as your faith dictates.
Yeah.
If you're starting to see that it's consuming your time, relationships, your study, your faith, basically with God, and it's interrupting your time with Him, that starts to get worrisome, because part of it is you do what's within reason, and you just rely on God to get you through with what you have. And if you don't have, He'll lead you to someone that does have, or He'll take care of you. We just have to, He'll take care of you in spirit, right? It's not to make any guarantees in the flesh, but just have faith in Him and just do what's appropriate. Because I know even just with other matters of things, I'm finding myself and how I use my time. There's things that convict me where, I don't know, certain hobbies that I've had and I've spent a lot of time on in the past, I'm starting to get just a little bit convicted to start reducing the amount of time that I spend on those things, and, put it more into ministry videos and things of that nature. And so you just do as much prep as your faith allows you to.
Yes. And you can't prepare for every contingency. Somebody could have their house wiped out by a bushfire, like what's happening in Australia, and all your preparations go up in flames. Then what? But then again, the other side of that is where I mentioned, say, silver and gold, or either or both, or whatever people have. That could be part of a contingency for that, because you could have a raging fire come through your house and the bushfire destroys everything, and that would survive it. And then you've got something to start again with. Whereas, other things like a bank account could go to nothing or whatever at some point, but those things will always have value. So I think it's good to spread around your preparations and don't stick to one thing. And in the end, we're still reliant on God. And if God says, takes everything we own away from us, then so be it. It happened to Job pretty much, and God restored Job. But I still think it's wise to prepare, because not every single person is going to have everything lost like that. And if you happen to be one of those that is, well, then you're really at God's mercy. But at the same time too. We've had the faith to prepare, and it's like, okay, God, my preparations were destroyed, but I did my best, so now it's up to you anyway.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
yeah. The other thing, you mentioned the hobbies and things. Yeah, I was just thinking the other day, because I used to follow sport a lot more closely. These days, I basically hardly watch or follow any sport except for Test cricket, which I know Americans don't like at all. But, I mean, New Zealand should have had a good team, supposedly, and we've just been to Australia and absolutely been hammered to pieces like you wouldn't believe. It's like the worst, and you can go kind of get really down about it and think, oh, and it can ruin your day or your week or whatever. But in the end, it's only sport, and so many people are so consumed with American football or cricket or rugby or basketball or baseball or whatever, so that becomes their life. And it's like, this is where we got to have our priorities right, eh?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I'm fairly young, so I'm 36, and 7 years ago was probably the end of when I stopped playing video games and things. So I don't know if I'd necessarily say I was addicted, but I was addicted. We'll say that. And it can make you really angry, especially playing online. Just same thing with sports, how it can just make people incredibly angry. And part of me just withdrawing from all that was having children. So I got 3 children under 7, so that wiped out all of my time. But even outside of that, I just realized in the time that we're in, there's just much more important things to be focused on. So yeah, there's just a lot of things that are just sort of shedding away from my life in favor of, or in necessity of, other things.
Yeah, I think it's a journey too. Like I find that God puts his finger on things in my life, and one thing at a time, or sometimes something it's the same thing, and I just don't act as obedient as I should have, and it comes back around to it again and again. But I think that's the process, that we are growing, or we should be. Yeah. If we're truly saved, then I think we're not going to be content to live as we always have when God highlights things and puts his finger on them. And we, I think truly saved people, they are convicted and they try and do what they can about those areas of their life. The people that don't do anything and continue on and in whatever it is, some sort of sin, or whether it's a small one or a big one, even just could be just being a workaholic and not having any time spent with your family, but they justify it or whatever. But I think if God really has his finger on your life, he's not going to let those out of balance things go unchallenged.
Right. Yep. I agree. And there was something else I wanted to mention as well. Unless you're finished with your thought, it was sort of about community in terms of preparedness.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, I pretty much said way more than I normally say in a episode. I feel like I've been talking. I'll shut up now.
No. I had mentioned this on one of my programs as well, but I think one of the things that can help people get started in preparation is to find like-minded individuals. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the roads that people go down as they try to find prepper communities, they just try to find people on these social media networks that are prepping. And here in the States, I don't know how popular it is out in New Zealand or Australia, but there's websites for prepper groups, and there's things called militias, right? It sort of goes back to, the foundation of America and the militia, the Minutemen, things like that. And there's some good people in those groups, but I find a lot of them are not so good, at least in terms of matters on faith. And so really, I think first and foremost is, trying to just have fellowship in your locale, not just on the internet, but friendship and fellowship in your locale. And, the church was ecclesia, right? The church was like going from house to house. It was private home group settings. It wasn't necessarily big churches, although there were some recorded in Acts. There's some big churches. But really, I think it's a wonderful thing to try to find like-minded believers, and you can fellowship in your house and do Bible study in your house. And hopefully they see the signs of the times, and you can fellowship and talk about prophecy and some of the signs that you're seeing. And hopefully that also leads to, hey, let's all prepare together. And I think that when you're, doing it with more than just yourself, there's an aptitude to do it more so than if you were doing it only by yourself. And it just helps. It also takes a little bit of the bondage away with thinking that you have to do everything. It's a community, it's a community effort. And we're really going to have to, Christians are really going to have to rely on one another during these times. Here's to the patience and perseverance of the saints. And I think fellowship is going to be really incredibly important during these times. And so if you're looking for a group, I'd say start there. Don't go trying to find a prepper group. Don't go try to find a militia group. Try to find people that are going to exhort and edify you in the spirit, people of the faith, brothers and sisters, and then work your way from there.
Yeah, good thinking. I was actually thinking kind of along those lines a little bit earlier on today, just reading the Bible and things that were going on actually towards the end of the Gospel of Matthew. And it's obvious where they arrested Jesus and they, they kill him because he blasphemed. And it's sort of, I was thinking, far out, that was really extreme, they actually were able to use that, blaspheme thing to kill Jesus as an enemy of the Roman Empire or whatever, an enemy of, the Jews and so on. I was thinking, man, we forget, this is what it was actually like at those days. And so we've become so accustomed to a pretty cruisy life. What if that all changes and we face real persecution in the church in the future? Because I think that is what's going to happen. How are we going to survive if we've just expected that, the worst thing that happens to us in a week is if something doesn't work on our computer or app fails or we're late for work or whatever it is, things that are compared to what so many people throughout the centuries and indeed other countries in the world have faced. We in the Western world so far have had it pretty cruisy and pretty cushy life. But that could really change.
Yeah. I had a thought on this as I was reading. It was Chronicles or Kings or something in the Old Testament, but it was basically one of the sieges against, I don't know whether it was Judah or Jerusalem, or it was some siege against the Hebrews, and there was a man. I think it was one of the kings of Israel, I believe. It was during the time of Elisha. And do you remember scripture where the king is walking on the watchtower wall and there's a woman that pleads with him saying, "Oh king, my neighbor said, let's eat. Yeah, let's eat my son today and then we'll eat their son tomorrow." Yeah. And so we boiled up our son and then now it came time for us to eat their son and they won't let us eat him. And so she's basically imploring the king, give up his, go to them so they can give up their son so we can eat. That's how bad it was.
Yeah.
And I think in the siege of Jerusalem by the Romans, right? I haven't actually read it for myself, but this whole 70 AD thing, there was cannibalism and all sorts of things. And you sort of see the destitute nature of people when things go bad. And what's sort of frightening, the thing that I thought about this is that people right now, even in a time of prosperity, are gloating and are cheerful about killing their own children with abortion. Yeah. Especially, the ones, like there's some that see it as something shameful. Like they do it and they don't really want to tell anyone, and maybe they do it multiple times, but there's people even on another level than that that are just completely destitute, and they say like, my abortion, my right, and I love it. They're boasting about how many abortions that they've had. And so just boasting in death and killing their own children. And I couldn't help but think back to, the story in the Old Testament where they literally have no appreciation for human life at all, to where it's like eating their own children was nothing. And here, again, in a time of prosperity, you're sort of saying, having those same types of attitudes towards their children, and we're not even to the point of tribulation, great tribulation or anything like that. So can you imagine, when we get to the point where people don't have the things that they have now, compared with how they're currently acting? It's phenomenal.
Well,
Days of Noah.
Yeah, and you just look at Black Friday sales or whatever, and people get into big fights over getting the last something or other in a store. They're just about ready to kill somebody so they can get the latest whatever stupid thing it is. So, yeah, when it comes to really tough times, how is it going to look? It won't be pretty. And the abortion thing, that upsets me quite a lot when I think about it. The number of children that are being slaughtered every year. It's the number one cause of death, really.
Something like what? Like how many? 48 million a year? So that's something crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. Yes, I don't think God will turn a blind eye to it indefinitely, and then we wonder why judgment will come because of these types of things. And I know so many people are saying, oh, it's not God's judgment, none of this, and so on. But I'm thinking, boy, we've really heaped up, as a generation, we've really heaped up the coals on our head in terms of the things like that which deserve a judgment. Anyway, man, our time has absolutely raced away, Mike. We'll have to look to wrap up, I guess. Have you got any sort of last thoughts that you feel that you want to get across?
No, not in particular. Just trying to stay watchful with seeing what's going on in the news. But for 2020, one of the things that I'm just doing is just inner reflection. Right, I am not a perfect Christian, and there's a lot of areas in my life that I'm trying to prune out, so to say, trying to give more, trying to love more, especially loving your enemies. People always try to say, how can I not be deceived? And so I think we usually gravitate towards the knowledge component, right? Got to watch out for the NAR, got to watch out for Roman Catholicism, got to watch out for prosperity gospel, false healings, all that. And that's good. I think we do need to watch out for those things. But then there's other things that are a lot tougher. When you start reading about, turn the other cheek. If, your captive tells you to walk 1 mile, walk another with him. And, trying to love your enemies, but also reconcile that with the fact that there's a point where you have to dust off your feet. And it's things like that, love, truly loving with the love of Christ. That is a harder thing. And again, we don't necessarily do that by our own power. We do that by the grace and power of Jesus Christ. But it's about the inner reflection and seeing our brokenness and how we can't do that by ourselves, and asking God to, sort of transform us into His image so that we can do those things. So that's what we really should be focusing on. Searching our hearts, pruning out anything that's not good, and getting ready for His appearance.
Very good words. And I think my final thoughts, which kind of follow on from that, would be, remember the boy with the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, when people are prepping in that. Jesus fed 5,000 because a boy had the foresight to bring 5 loaves and 2 fish. And also not only the foresight, but the generosity to actually give them to Jesus, not knowing what would happen to them. He was giving up his food. And Jesus multiplied it. So, when it comes to preparations, I think we can do what we can do, and then the rest is up to God. We give it to God, and then He can multiply it. Well, thanks, Mike. I mean, it's been a great discussion, and time has flown.
Yeah, that went quick.
Yeah. So where can the listeners find you online? I'm sure everyone knows, but if anyone doesn't, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I do have a website, onpointpreparedness.net, but it's really out of date. Pretty much my main online presence is on YouTube. So you just look up Onpoint Preparedness, and I'm the only one. So that's good.
Yep, so visit Mike's channel. And don't forget to visit A Minute to Midnight's website too, folks, aminutetomidnight.com. We put all our shows there. On the website and on iTunes and on YouTube as well. And I'm sure there'll be a bunch of people that have hit the dislike button because I didn't bag Israel in the show and because I mentioned silver and gold as being positive things. So But for those that haven't hit the dislike button, don't forget to hit the like button and to share this video and leave us some comments. We're always keen to hear your thoughts as well. And the Minute to Midnight's run 100% by donations, and you can donate on our website if you want to help us. That'll be much appreciated. And the music I've written, played and recorded that, and you can download it for free too if you want to. I think that's probably about all I have to say. So yeah, Mike, I just want to say thanks heaps for being on the show again, and no doubt we'll do some more shows on our respective channels together during 2020.
Yep, thank you.